Training camp month is officially here as we enter July, and Lamar Jackson is throwing to some of his receivers, but some of them were not spotted. We talk about that, the wide receiver position in general, and so much more coming up next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens. We are your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, and I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you as always on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here today and making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every day. Of course, we're free and available on all podcasting platforms, so if you like to consume our content in video form, we are here for you on YouTube. You can like and subscribe over there. Also in audio form, anywhere you get your shows, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, we have you over there as well. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sportsing like we want them to. With this summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We're back on Taco Tuesday, and here with me today is Jake Louque of Exit 52. Jake, we're in the dog days of summer when it comes to NFL football and NFL football content, kind of scratching and scraping and seeing what we can get. I know we're in the month of training camp, so it'll be over soon, but how has this last month been treating you in terms of that?
Yeah, man, it's I feel like we talk about this every time we get together or we do a show or anything. It just feels like what a quiet Ravens offseason this one has been compared to the ones in recent years past. And I think that's certainly a good thing for my blood pressure. I don't know if it's as good as on the content front, but sometimes it's okay to take a little bit of a step back from a content perspective even. So I'm good with it all.
Yeah, and I think after the offseason that we had a couple off seasons ago with Lamar Jackson and that contract situation, I think it's nice to kind of take a step back, even though that wasn't happening at this point in the offseason. It kind of felt like that was just it was like go, 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 go. But now we can finally step back a little bit and relax. But that doesn't mean there's not stuff to talk about today. Obviously, the big news of yesterday, Jake, was Lamar Jackson spotted down. He had said during his press conference when he talked to the media, he was going to go down to Florida, try to get some stuff organized with his wide receivers. And we saw him throwing to Nelson Aguilar. I believe Tez Walker was there as well. I'm all for this personally. I think getting that chemistry, just kind of hanging out and getting that camaraderie going. I love when guys just get together on their own time and kind of just get reps in. But I know it's not the be-all, end-all. And the other conversation about that is Rashod Bateman was not spotted. Maybe he was there and there were just no clips of him, but I think people are saying, yeah, look, he's not there. Why is he not there? There's a lot of anger about that. Are you angry about that?
And the media availability that you're talking about, like Aguilar even mentioned the fact that they had done it and they were going to continue to do it. And I think part of it is a big function of the fact that all those guys are from Florida and Bateman is not. Bateman's from Georgia. So and I don't think he lives in Georgia. He seems to spend a lot of his time in LA actually right now. I'm not sure what the connection is there, if he just kind of has a house out there in the off season or whatever it might be. I'm really just not angry about it at all. I've seen, from my co-host, obviously, and my good friend Spenny there, he was kind of going a little wild on it on Twitter. There are other subsets of people on Twitter that this just seems to completely rile them up, this whole Rashod Bateman thing. And man, for me, I know he was a first round pick. I know it's a little bit polarizing, but I just I don't know, it's probably, I wouldn't go so far as to call him a non-factor or just kind of found money if he has a good season, but I don't know. I kind of don't really find myself thinking of him that much. He just hasn't been on the field for them a ton throughout his career. I know he's had some ups and downs when he has, certainly probably you would argue more downs recently. And it's tough. And you want him to rebuild it. And especially with the fact that the offense is kind of built around the idea that they need him to. So I'm certainly hopeful, but it just doesn't register much for me that he's not going down and getting in sort of glorified reps against air with Lamar Jackson and with those other guys. The important thing is going to be being there in training camp, which, Spenny made the point on Twitter that, when we saw that kind of stretch from him in 2022, when he was kind of blowing the doors off the opposing defenses, that was when he had actually had a healthy training camp for once in his career. So really that's going to be the key for me, is getting in there, working with Monken and all the guys, working with the coaching staff, getting real substantive, tangible work in, not this kind of other stuff, which I think, while great and additive, is, I wouldn't say necessarily for show. It's more just kind of kind of a cherry on top.
Right. And look, it'd be great if he was there. It'd be awesome if he was there with Lamar throwing and doing all that stuff. But the Ravens aren't going to win or lose a Super Bowl because Rashod Bateman was not with Lamar Jackson in Florida at the beginning of July. Training camp is the big part. That's where, you get the consistent reps with your teammates and coaches. And I think it's, again, this, like, we see all these clips and we're like, oh yeah, like they're throwing it and it's great, but everybody should be there. And that's just not what happens. That's just not what happens.
You know what sucks about the Chiefs and Patriots winning like every other Super Bowl the last century is, like, I think it would be really funny if somebody went back and did like a kind of correlation causation thing where they studied, like, the Super Bowl winning team and whether or not the quarterback worked with all the receivers in some sort of far-flung location from where their actual training camp is going to be, kind of off hours. I think that would be an interesting study. You still could do it, but like I said, it just feels like it's either the Patriots or the Chiefs or bust for a lot of the time here. So
you could throw some box scores together on that. How many incompletions, how many catches, drops in the offseason, just down training on your own. You could do something like that. But I do think a lot of this, Jake, has to do with the fact that it is Rashod Bateman, right? I feel like the conversation, you kind of mentioned it right there, the fact that this whole situation in general around Rashod, him being the first round pick, being injured, not living up to expectations, the weird, like, not showing up to training camp initially, or I think mini camp or training camp, they got that 5th-year option just removed from his contract, so we had to sign the extension. It's been a very, as you said, up and down career, Ravens tenure for Rashod Bateman. Do you think this is amplified because we're talking about Rashod Bateman and not somebody else?
Yeah, and the kind of another key thing there that you didn't really hit on is that he has not exactly endeared himself to this fan base. It's just to call a spade, to call balls and strikes. And I actually do like Rashod. We got the chance to, the pleasure really, to interview him a couple years ago for a Super Bowl promo. Really nice kid, super respectful. You can see that in a lot of his other interviews. Like when he's actually like talking to people or even in front of the media, like you can tell that he's a guy who there's a lot going on behind his eyes. He seems like a switched on kind of individual. But when you have those types of people, and I have firsthand experience with this, I think maybe I'm certainly like this myself sometimes, is that you can let little things get to you a little bit. And I think that has happened with him throughout his career. We saw him lash out at DeCosta on Twitter. I don't think fans of the Ravens really cared for that too much. I think there's been some other things. He's actually been kind of clapping back at some people on Twitter the last couple of days even. So he's the type of guy who's, I wouldn't say there's necessarily a darker side to him, but there's just kind of a saltier side to him. He's got a little bit of sand in him, and he'll kind of fight back against these people that criticize him, whether they're Ravens fans or not. And like, I could see why that wouldn't necessarily, endear him to some of these people. But for me, it's like, I don't know. I almost kind of like that. Like, it means, at the very least, it means he cares, right? Like, he's not just a guy who's just showing up and trying to collect paychecks, this, that, and the other. Like, I think he really is a competitive dude that wants to do great things in his career. He's just been stymied again and again by injuries and all this other crap. And he certainly made some mistakes along the way. But just overall, it's just, I think to the original point, yes, I absolutely, like, if this were another player, even if another player who had struggled like he has, I don't think it would be that much of an issue because like I said, I do think he struggled a little bit to really assimilate into the culture here in some ways. And I don't know, when he signed that extension, it seems like he's finally kind of trying to put some of those skeletons into the closet, put everything to rest and move forward. I think that'll be best for everyone.
Yeah. And I remember a couple of months ago, he went on with Glenn Clark Radio, and Glenn does a great job. And he kind of owned up and said, hey, you know what? I get that, like, the fan base in my relationship hasn't been the easiest thing over the course of my career. And he said he didn't blame him. Like he said, I don't blame the fan base if they have that opinion of me. But in that, he did, and to your point, it felt like he was very genuine, and he just wants to right this thing. He wants to right this ship. He wants to stay healthy. But if Bateman gets injured in training camp again, that's the story. It's not about him not being in Florida with Lamar and throwing. The story is, can he stay healthy for a full 17 games, or at least very close to it, and be able to get that chemistry? Because I think it's such a big thing that people underrate sometimes, Jake. It's almost, well, by the time the season starts, you got to be on the same page, regardless of if you miss time in training camp or not. The reality, we saw this with Baltimore, even back in like 2021, where like their entire offensive line had to miss time due to injury in training camp. And they just weren't playing well to start the year because they didn't have time to gel with each other. It's the same thing where Bateman just hasn't had that. He's either been injured to start seasons, gets injured early in the season, gets injured in training camp. That has a big impact on how he performs and how he and Lamar have a connection together.
Yeah, no, it definitely, it's all part of it. And honestly, like, to the overall point, maybe it would do him some good to get down there and work with them in Florida. It's just like you said, is that going to make the difference between winning the Super Bowl or not? I'm not so sure. Like I said, somebody should do a study on it. Quarterbacks working with, wide receivers in random locations, kind of off the clock, as it were. That would be interesting to see.
they should do like a tour. Like they should go to all different places. Like, Lamar gets the whole band together. They get like a RV or something, and they go and they travel up the coast and throw in as many states as you can. That could be a documentary someone could make.
Yeah, presidents used to do the old whistle stop tours on trains. I feel like you're kind of getting into that kind of territory. It's almost like running for office or something like that. Listen, with the way the game is growing globally here, you got to win the hearts and minds one person at a time. So I'm right there with you.
I like that. Go abroad for this stuff. That's what I'm talking. Get a little vacation going right now. I remember a couple of years ago, Jake, it was Arizona, right? Lamar went out there with like Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown, and I can't remember who else was out there. Bateman, was he there for that? Do you remember?
He's worked out with them before. I'm not sure if that was Arizona. That might have been California.
Yeah, one of the two, because that the Sammy Watkett guy. So much has changed over the last couple of years. I can't even keep track anymore. Who's been in, who's been out. But I think that's the other thing too, is it's the role almost to me, where if Bateman was coming in and they had traded for some like Ayuk or Cortland Sutton, and like he was going to be a number 3 or I think a number 4 would be a stretch. But if there was another vet there, it wasn't Flowers and Bateman, it was Flowers, someone else, and Bateman. The fact is, Bateman's going to have a huge role this season. They're putting a lot of trust into him. And that's why people are saying, oh, you got to go down there, get as much work in as you can. Where for players, yeah, like, again, it'd be great if he was there. But I'm pretty sure he's probably working out on his own and doing his own thing. And again, in a couple of weeks, it's all going to be a moot point because they're going to be in training camp getting work together.
Yeah, and it's funny that like now it's like on the receiver and it's the receiver's problem. I remember having this discussion 10 plus years ago about Joe Flacco and like, oh, wow, this is an indictment on Joe Flacco that he never does this kind of thing. He never works with his receivers outside of training camp, that kind of thing. It's just always been kind of an empty talking point to me. And it's so funny that it always flares up right around this time. You mentioned the dog days of summer, just kind of a dearth of content to be found. People got to grasp at straws for anything they've seen. I cannot wait for this story to pop up on PFT Live tomorrow with Mike and Chris and just get all the hot takes from those guys.
Yeah, the age of social media has certainly done something, at least, where if there is no social media, we even know about this. Maybe a guy or two would see him in passing, throwing on the field, tell their buddies or whatever. But here, you got a phone, you got a video, you take it. And if guys aren't there, they get the flag. So again, I would love him to be out there, but I'm not going to sit here and just absolutely bash him because it's almost the same conversation as voluntary OTAs. It's like, sure, it'd be great if they were there, but it's not something that I'm losing sleep over, essentially, is what my point is.
Yeah, and that kind of it ties into the voluntary OTAs thing where it's like that stuff is good for younger players. Rashod is, he's a veteran at this point. Lamar's a veteran at this point. Aguilar is a veteran. Like, Zay Flowers, he's going into year 2. He had a great first year. Like all these guys, they're good enough that they don't need this kind of ancillary stuff. Like going back to the original point, it's all about training camp. It's all about getting the real reps, the live fire in there. That's what's going to really kind of sharpen the sword for them, I think.
Yep, all about training camp, 100%. Coming up, though, we're going to be moving over to the defensive side of the ball, talking about Zach Orr a little bit. Big year for him, obviously, replacing Mike McDonald. We'll talk about the trust that people should have in him. All that and more coming up next year on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. There are plenty of times where you can maybe tend to compare life to others. Social media, I think, plays a part in that. But when that happens to me, I just want to take a step back and look at what I have. So comparison's the thief of joy. It's easy to envy other people's lives, and it might look like they have it together on their Instagram, and in reality, they probably don't. Therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have, so you can start living your best life. Therapy has so many different benefits to it. It can be helpful in learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to become the best version of yourself, and just for those who experience major trauma, it's for everyone. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. Switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. We're back for our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostraker and Jake Louque still talking with you here on this Taco Tuesday. Jake, it hurt a lot of people when Mike McDonald left for Seattle. I think the writing was kind of on the wall, and that's why people wanted the Ravens to win the Super Bowl so badly for many reasons, but one of them being it's just not going to be the same team this season. It's not the same team any year. From year to year, teams change, but Baltimore lost a lot. McDonald's a big loss. They had to move quickly with this whole hiring thing, though, because it's not like the offensive situation last year with Todd Monken, where they took their time. They had a nice long search, interviewed candidates, and did everything, and it took a while. The Ravens coaches were in high demand, and Zach Orr was one of those guys. So essentially they had to decide, We know Anthony Weaver went to Miami. We know Denard Wilson went to Tennessee. Orr is the guy who steps up and replaces Mike Macdonald. We've talked about the hire a little bit, you and I, but as we get closer to training camp, there's been a lot of conversation about, well, he's a first-time defensive coordinator, first-time play caller. Now, if you want to factor in his playing days, obviously that does help. There's not really it's tough to say because they have to start fast, the Ravens do, and Zach Orr is going to be learning on the fly a bit here, but he's a guy that's been in this organization for a long time. He's worked up the coaching ranks, and I think, to me at least, I do have trust in him to start fast, even though I know there will be bumps and bruises along the way.
Yeah, no, and it's funny, like the comparisons are going to be made to McDonald, and the recency bias is going to be hilarious because I guarantee you he's probably going to have, or the defense collectively is probably going to have a bad game within the first month, the first 2 months probably. I mean, they'd be lucky if they didn't, right? With a change like this and some of the changes they've had in personnel. And there's going to be the people calling for Zach Orr to be fired or this or that, whatever hyperbolic, crap that people want to throw out there. And, it'll be just kind of like, oh, well, this would never have happened with Mike Macdonald. Well, we'll all just forget, I guess, that Mike Macdonald had that game against the Dolphins in week 2 of his rookie year as a coordinator. Rex Ryan going on to Get Up or whatever these ESPN shows that, just have to dredge the depths like we're talking about and excoriating him as this, hot shot coordinator, just trying to back up his guy, Wink Martindale there. There's just going to be a million things from a million different angles when he has his first bad game. I expect he'll have 1 or 2 early on. People, like I said, will freak out. And overall, he'll settle into the role nicely. That's just kind of my gut feeling. There's no way to tell like what the scheme is going to look like at this point.
Right. And look, Kyle Van Noy, he was asked and he said, I think I'm not going to say what it's going to be because that's a competitive disadvantage if you do that. But I remember the conversations, Jake, around that Miami game in week 2 a couple of years ago, which, by the way, I mean, we can be honest about it. McDonald was playing guys off when they should have been pressing up. The coverages were weird. The play calls were weird. And I think at that time it was, he's not ready. He's not ready. When in reality, it should have been, this is a guy that's learning. Give him it's week 2 of his first time ever being an NFL defensive coordinator. We know he went to Michigan and did his thing, but literally the next week, that was the turning point. And literally from then until the AFC Championship game, it was pretty smooth sailing for the most part from Mike Macdonald. And I think the comparisons will be there. I agree with you because it's a young first-time NFL defensive coordinator, spent all these years with the Ravens. It's like it's parallel. Plus, again, if you want to be a defensive coordinator of the Ravens, just be the inside linebackers coach and you're set because of all the past previous guys who have gotten that job. But I do think there has to be grace. It's the same conversation with the offensive line. They lose 3 starters. They're going to have a bunch of younger guys in there. You have to give this offensive line some grace early because it's not going to be sunshine and rainbows. It's the same thing with Orr, where there will be a bad game here and there. I'm predicting there will be, but I think that's going to get overblown to your point because the Ravens are in Super Bowl contention right now. And the conversation is going to be, well, they can't afford that. They can't afford that. And that's what it's going to be. Yeah,
no. And it's going to, Patrick Mahomes, game 1 in Arrowhead Stadium in a house that is going to be rocking. And I'm sure there's going to be a certain pop star up in one of the suites there that is just going to be drawing my ire for the entirety of the night and all that kind of stuff. Man, what a scene that's going to be. And, I'm not saying it has potential to get ugly, but the Chiefs enjoy kind of stepping on and kind of grounding grounding their foes into the dust and embarrassing them every chance they get. The Bills know the feeling. The Bengals do to an extent. They've gotten them a few times, of course, but they love doing that to the Bills. They love doing it to the Bengals. They've certainly loved doing it to the Ravens, and I think they're going to obviously have this one circled on the calendar there, and they have the added motivation of the fact that they got their doors blown off by the Lions in week 1. I think they'll be, much more prepared this time around. So Zach Orr's going to have his hands full. And, maybe that is kind of the week 1 game is sort of that outlier that you throw out and then it's all uphill from there. It's almost, kind of like, hey, we get off to a bad start. We flushed out one and then we move on. Who knows?
Yeah, and I think if that happens, which again, I would not be shocked if it does, but if that happens, that is going to be a disaster. Just a social media content disaster if that happens.
Yeah, just let it happen in week 1, though, and it'll be fine. These seasons are so long at this point. They're going to be 52 weeks out of the year, pretty soon, and we're going to be breaking these things down the entire time. But like I said, it's 17 games or whatever it is, and the playoffs and everything. They're so freaking long. So let's say they do lose that game, and then a few weeks later they're sitting 2-2, 3-1, whatever it is, 4-1. It'll all be forgotten. So when and if it does happen in the moment, just remember that. Try not to get too overreactionary, and just judge what you see on its face and have some hope that it'll get worked out.
Yeah, I've also seen a bunch of national media pundits say that the Ravens could start like 1-4 or 2-5 or something. I understand there are going to be some bumps along the way early, but I don't expect it to be that. I don't expect
that is the one when like it's the absolute bottom of the barrel. Like we're talking about the dredging the bottom of the barrel. That's like when some guy in a studio in like Culver City, California, is like wearing a suit, walking up to like a touch screen, and he's like doing the W's and L's next to the team's name. And I think it might have even been Brockman on Rich Eisman's show was like doing it. It's like, I like Rich and all those guys, but like, man, like you really got to fill some airtime when you're doing those hour-long, multi-hour radio shows. And like some of these studio shows with NFL Network, may they soon rest in peace, and ESPN, like the kind of the ticking off the win-loss thing on one specific team. Like that's when you really like the producers are just kind of like sitting around throwing, paper balls at the wastebasket trying to figure things out.
Yeah, shout out Culver City. I was out there for a little bit, and it's
I forgot
electric atmosphere out there. But I think the one that everybody gets is Adam Rank does it, or he did it, and he did it for the Ravens. And shout out to Adam, because I had put out, like, I think it was after maybe the San Francisco game or maybe a Cleveland game the Ravens played, and he was a good sport about it. He ended up being a good sport about it, because it was one of those things where he predicted like the Ravens to be. It was like he'll predict a good team to go like 9-8 or something, and everybody will lose their mind. And it's kind of like that. But speaking of, this is the part of the show everybody's tuning in for. Jake, are we still on Taylor Swift watch in the glorious year of 2024?
Honestly, like Spencer tries to tell me that we're not. He tries to like always talk me off the ledge with this kind of stuff. And I like to think that I'm a pretty level-headed guy, even more than him in some ways. Like I'm usually the one kind of talking him off the hyperbole. Dude, like this thing is far from over. I am still seeing like, I don't know. I don't follow like these Taylor Watch accounts on Twitter or whatever it is now. I'm getting those things fed to me now. I'm getting like, I don't know. I can't escape it. It's like Cedric Mullins. I can't escape it. And like, it just keeps coming around and coming around. And guess what? It's already July now. Training camp is this month and it hasn't dissipated yet. So yeah, I think we're still very much on Taylor Swift watch. And, a couple months from today, I wouldn't be surprised if we're, fully just loaded for bear Taylor Swift watch heading into Kansas City, Missouri.
I don't know how much more I can take. I don't know how much more I can. And it's no disrespect to her, obviously, but like the NFL is milking it. And I get it. I get why they're doing it, but it's everywhere. And I think now we're starting to get the, Travis is at her concerts, like dressed up and dancing and like she, parading everything. And it's like, okay, it's one thing to have it during football season, but now we're on like the year round Taylor Swift watch. Like that's the thing that I think is getting people right now.
What's so funny is when Americans, like rag on the British for like caring about their monarchy and stuff like that. And then we turn around and we do this kind of crap with like these people. Like we're all us humans. We're just, mice on the wheel, really. We're all just kind of, doing the exact same thing and not realizing it.
Yeah. Everybody has their thing. And for the NFL, Taylor Swift, you had told me 2 years ago, Taylor Swift would be essentially one of the faces of the NFL. I would have called you crazy, but here we are, and Taylor Swift is essentially one of the faces of the NFL. So I don't know when it's going to end, if it ever will. I mean, if there is a wedding at some point, I think that is going to be the ultimate peak content for the NFL. I think they're rooting for it, if I'm being honest.
Well, I think honestly, I don't follow her music that closely. I feel like maybe things are starting to get a little stale. We're getting a lot of like album re-releases from what I understand. Mm-hmm. It'll be like, oh, this is like the 1989, and it's like the 1989 this version. I feel like we're kind of dredging the bottom of the barrel. I think she needs a breakup at this point to come up with some fresh content for the new album. So not predicting anything, but just saying, watch this space.
God, yeah, deluxe versions and deluxe versions, deluxe platinum version. We're getting all these forms of Taylor Swift. So we'll see.
I mean, people are buying it. God bless her. Like she's making money hand over fist off of all this stuff.
Oh yeah, no, still one of the most popular pop stars in the world. So got to give her credit where it's due. But coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk about AFC North expectations, not only for the Ravens, obviously, but their counterparts, Bengals, Browns, Steelers. Talk about that coming up next year on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much and never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So for MLB MVP, Gunnar Henderson is certainly in the conversation for that, you can go over to FanDuel and check out those odds. Or for football odds, the Ravens opened up as 2.5-point underdogs to the Kansas City Chiefs. So if you want to bet on that line, it'll probably be changing a bit. Head over to FanDuel as well. Head over to FanDuel.com/LockedOn on making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. We're backgrounding at Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher and Jake Louque still here with you. Again, really appreciate everybody tuning in and making Locked On Ravens a part of your day today. Be sure to like and subscribe, video form and audio form as well. Jake, the AFC North, I think, is going to be it's going to be a crazy year. I mean, the Ravens obviously took the cake last season, and no team has won the AFC North 3 years in a row. Just want to put that stat out there again, even though I know we're still working up to that. But the Bengals are getting Joe Burrow back. That's the big story. And Joe Burrow's getting all this media attention. Deshaun Watson back in Cleveland, which is that a good or a bad thing? It's still the question that we're trying to answer. Pittsburgh getting Russell Wilson, which somehow is so much better than what they had last season, including Justin Fields, who's now there as well. What's your overall take on this division? Because I think it's going to be good, but I just don't know how good yet.
Yeah, I think it's going to be good again. If I had to guess, I'd probably if I had to throw a dart at the wall, I'd say Pittsburgh and Cleveland, right around 500. You could give or take one or two with those two teams. And then I think Ravens and Bengals. I expect the Bengals to kind of be back in a big way here. I think Joe Burrow takes some time to get healthy. It wasn't a lower body thing this time, I think, for him, or was it? Remind me.
The Joe Burrow, this one was the wrist. He got injured in
it was the wrist, exactly. Yeah. So he's not, it's not like a planting issue. It's kind of more like, can you get the timing back with sort of the hand action that you have to work with as a quarterback there? So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I feel like he took plenty of time off, and that can sometimes be beneficial for a quarterback to clear your mind. They got some help with that tight end in the draft. I think they beefed up along the offensive line a little bit. I expect that they'll still be very much a factor, and I think they'll be right there with the Ravens challenging for the top of that division. But the Ravens aren't without problems themselves there with the offensive line issues that you mentioned earlier. That's still very much a concern to me. I think that's kind of faded into the background because it's such a boring position for one thing. And two, it's a position that the Ravens kind of figure out in some ways with the help of Jody Alessandros, who's just one of the more underrated position coaches in the league, and kind of the Harbaugh way with running the ball and everything. It's something they could certainly figure out, but I do expect some growing pains. And then obviously you mentioned the defense and the growing pains that could occur there. So yeah, I expect it to be between the Ravens and the Bengals ultimately, but you're right, man. I think this is a team or a division with four quality teams, and the Brownies, the Steelers, the Bengals, and obviously the Ravens. And I don't know, if I had to throw a dart at the board right now, I'd probably pick the Ravens to win the division, through pedigree. And I think they still have pretty darn good talent to rival with Cincy, but we'll see what happens after training camp, couple of weeks, get a feel for what we're seeing from all these teams, and make some real concrete predictions, not of the Adam Rank sort where we're walking up to the screen with the suit on and we're saying WL, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, not quite there yet. I am curious though with Cincinnati, because I think there's no shot T. Higgins goes back after next season. I think this is the last hurrah personally for T. Higgins in Cincinnati. They're going to have to pay Jamar Chase more quarterback money than Justin Jefferson got. I don't know, because you have to maximize Burrow's prime. And obviously they've done a great job with drafting and getting those guys around him like Chase and Higgins. But is this kind of, I don't want to call it a last hurrah. I don't think that's fair, because I think as long as they have Burrow, they can compete. But weapons wise, I feel like it's almost going to be like a passing of the torch from Higgins to Burton. And then after that, it's like their calling card has kind of been, well, you have Boyd in there too. So it's been Chase, Higgins, and Boyd. Yeah. And I think that Baltimore secondary versus Cincinnati receiver matchup has always been the one after this year. And obviously it depends on Burton, I think, a lot, but it's going to be interesting because the Bengals have the Higgins thing, but then what are the Ravens going to do with Brandon Stevens? I think both teams kind of have. And also, if you want to go into detail, Marlon too, that contract is going to become more and more of a conversation point, which I know it already has. And Marlon's Bleacher Report and everything, Marlon's already addressed it too. So it's all craziness.
He's really kind of dialed things back on the Twitter perspective. Some interesting takes on the debate the other night. I don't know if you saw that from Marlon.
No, I didn't see those.
We don't have to discuss them. I'm just kind of worth taking a look back.
Marlon, I remember the days when he was, every other day or every day. The food takes were nonstop. He was almost tweeting his life, which I think people loved. at the same time.
That was kind of my beat, man. You're one of these guys who's really gotten your name out there from resharing the videos and your fun captions that you do. Obviously, like Marlon was my beat, like covering the what's coffee gonna do for a guy like me and like all that kind of stuff. Like he really has had an interesting history with the old X app, as we call it now. Yeah. But yeah, it's he like I said, he's kind of gotten away from it, but it was almost like a vintage performance the other night. It's fun to watch when he lets the dog out of the cage sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, what's coffee gonna do for a guy like me? Has to be your all time, right? That's the all time one.
That's it's just it's like my totem, my ka. Shout out to my guy Stephen King, the gunslinger.
Yeah, God, Marlon was, maybe he can get back, but prime Twitter Marlon Humphrey, we might never see anything like it again. We might not.
It's the girlfriend, now fiance, I'm pretty sure, has really reined him in.
He got married, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it could be honestly. And like that all ties in. He's way less public now. I think he just needed a nice woman in his life, and he's settled down now.
Look at that. Well, congratulations to whether I think he is married now. So congratulations to Marlon. But Pittsburgh wise, Jake, Russell Wilson coming in. We know he was. That trade for both teams, honestly, was not as good for either one as I thought. Denver obviously got the very short end of that stick, but Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky last year were absolute disasters, and Mike Tomlin still found a way to do his Mike Tomlin voodoo magic and get this team into the playoffs, even though they weren't uber competitive. Mason ended up getting them in there somehow. Do you think Pittsburgh got better this offseason? Because I still worry about their wide receiver position. People talk about how awful the Ravens wide receiver positions have been over the years. The Steelers have George Pickens and literally no one else.
Yeah, the receiver, I think it is concerning. I think Pickens is very good. I don't know if he's as great as some sort of Ravens fans with some kind of fan fiction that still kind of pine for George Pickens tend to, try to say that he is, but he's a very good wide receiver. Outside of that, you're right. Not a whole lot to get excited about. But overall, like, I do expect them to be competitive and maybe even a little bit better than last year. I mean, listen, like, Mason Rudolph, I don't care what he did last year. You can't talk me into that guy being a real starting NFL quarterback. Kenny Pickett, kind of the same thing. I mean, he had some talent, but like, my God, that guy had attitude issues, and you can't have attitude issues if you're like the 27th best starting quarterback in the league. That's just not going to work, and it's certainly not going to work in Pittsburgh, where it's just kind of, put your head down and just go to work. But what I am interested to see here, and my God, did Hard Knocks nail this division for the one that they picked for the in-season thing here, Mr. Unlimited and Mike Tomlin. I mean, what a personality kind of, medley that's going to be in that Pittsburgh locker room. Can't wait to see that. Justin Fields, there's, some interesting stuff going on with him with the vegan stuff and all that. And he obviously, clashed with the Chicago media here and there. Maybe some of them were misunderstandings. I totally get it. But, man, that's going to be an interesting sort of personality brew in that quarterback room there. It's really fascinating stuff. And for what it's worth, I do think both those guys, I'd rather have than, Pickett and Rudolph and whatever else they were throwing out there the last couple of years.
Yeah, me too, man. Can you imagine high knees on the plane after the Steelers lose a game, going past Mike Tomlin with high knees? I don't think that go over super well.
Steelers fans are so jaded too. Like, it's funny, like Ravens fans, like a lot of Ravens fans call for Harbaugh's head, but like, man, imagine if you had gone without a quarterback all this time, that would have been tough. Like, at least the Ravens fans have Lamar Jackson to hang their hats on. Like, the Steelers fans haven't even had that since Roethlisberger kind of fell off a cliff there.
Yeah, that's another feather in the cap for the don't take Lamar Jackson for granted argument, which should always be an argument. But are you buying Cleveland, Jay? I mean, their defense is awesome. They're getting Nick Chubb back at some point. But, I mean, this club sinks or swims with Deshaun Watson. It's been a lot of sinking with him so far during his tenure.
I just kind of wonder if they've hit like an emotional ceiling at a certain extent. Like, they went through so much the last couple of years, a lot of it self-inflicted with the Watson stuff, which I don't think we can just completely let them off the hook for that still, at kind of what just a craven, cynical move that was to go and get him and pay him all that money and what that says for it. And I don't mean to morally grandstand or whatever. That's just, my feelings on it, and I won't dwell on it too much, but I don't know. It just feels like it hasn't worked out for them on the field. Whatever else has gone on behind the scenes, I'm not totally sure. Like, there's, been concerns with the injuries and like, was he maybe not playing when he could have and stuff like that at times. I'm pretty sure it's just been a weird experience there overall. And I don't know. I just kind of wonder if eventually you just sort of emotionally peak, because it looked like in that second Ravens game, everything was finally coming together. He comes back and leads them to this big victory where they, they stick it to the Ravens, and I think they win 34-31. He's shut down for the rest of the season. the very next day. I don't know if that's, the wheel of justice kind of turning back against them for what they did there with Watson. Like I said, I hate to keep morally grandstanding on it, but it just it's hard not to notice the irony in the stuff sometimes. And I don't know, then Flacco comes in and they go on this magic carpet ride, and ultimately that, ends the way that it does, where they get blown out in the playoffs there and everything. It's just hard to sustain winning for that long with just absolutely nothing going on at quarterback. So you're right. They go as Watson goes. And if he doesn't really put it together here in what we keep saying is going to be a competitive division, it's hard to really get super excited about them. So yeah, I think they'll be in the mix. I think they'll be right around 500, maybe give or take one win the other way, or, one way. And, it's just going to be kind of another, I don't want to say forgettable, because Cleveland Browns fans, you talk about taking for granted. They can't take for granted seasons like that, but just kind of another one of those types of years for them.
The absolute cinema would be to, in that second Ravens game, if Watson is injured, have Tyler Huntley roll out there and face off against Lamar.
I mean, listen, who's the most recent, more recent Pro Bowl quarterback out of him, out of Flacco, out of Watson?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, Tyler Huntley is that guy. So this Pro Bowl quarterback, Tyler Huntley, to all of us, obviously we have to respect him as such. But the AFC North going to be a crazy division. Jake, appreciate you for hopping on. Please tell people where they can find you and what you're working on here as we, again, get through these dog days of summer.
Yeah, thanks as always for having me, man. You guys can find me at Jake Louque. That's Louque on Twitter, working on the Exit 52 podcast. As always, that's Exit 52 podcast on Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. And you can find us on YouTube and and podcast platforms as well. Covering the Orioles pretty darn heavy right now. We are, we talk about the dog days of summer with the Ravens. Well, things are really hot with the Orioles right now, obviously. So if you're into that sort of thing, the Baltimore Orioles, we're covering them a couple times a week. We go live after every series. We'll do one-off episodes to discuss big moves, things of that nature. So yeah, it's pretty hot for that right now. Tune in back into some Ravens content. We actually took a couple weeks off from it, which I think was a nice reprieve. Probably get back into that pre-training camp here. As like I said, that's right around the corner. So very exciting stuff.
Yeah, all the links to Jake's work, of course, in the description down below. Check it out and check out all that he does. Really plugged in to the Baltimore sports world. Jake, appreciate you again. Thanks so much for hopping on, and thank you for tuning into Locked On Ravens today. Be sure to, again, subscribe, follow along, video form and audio form. Coming up tomorrow, more Ravens content. Stay tuned. We'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.